We certainly learned a lot as we were doing this. The first thing is that NPS it's a bit of a funny metric, and if any of you are using NPS, and it sounds like lots of you are using NPS, then you probably know what I mean. You need hundreds of users, and part of the reason you need hundreds of users is that we chunk people arbitrarily into these three buckets that we call advocates, passives and detractors. You do that, statistically you lose a whole lot of information. So we tend to use the standard mean of the likelihood to recommend scale itself. The problem with that is that we then had a communication challenge. People are like, what is this thing, the LTR? You said it was an NPS. What are you actually doing? So that was a bit of a challenge. In reality, we can't test an NPS pre-launch. That's just not something we can do. Our executive said that very helpfully, but that's actually not something that we can do. So we had to change the conversation to, it's actually about advocacy, right? It's about this construct that is advocacy. And we have a range of different things that we can do to kind of get a sense of advocacy in a pre-launch state. So that was a bit of a challenge. It's also what I call the tail wagging the dog. I've just presented to you a test methodology, and that's what it is that we do. We test stuff. The problem with testing stuff is you're not fundamentally changing stuff. We all know that's something that design does very well. And so what that means, and that's to the next one as well, is sometimes we miss the opportunity. Sometimes you cannot stop that thing from launching. It's a multi-million dollar project for someone like Telstra with a bunch of revenue tied to that launch, and there is no way that we are holding that up with the governance framework. So there is a bit of risk of that, and we operate at the end of the process. What we tried to do, and we do work in a broader design group, we're trying to bring that story right back to the start. Figure out what actually drives advocacy for your product and service, bake that in, we'll test to make sure that it's actually there. And the last one, which is also another significant one, is that there's a very big difference between a service walkthrough and the actual live state of a product. What we test in a service walkthrough is what the product manager intends the service experience to be like, which is actually a different thing to what the service experience is actually like when it hits an operational environment. Operational environments are very big and complicated, and we put services into them, and there's a whole lot of inherent issues in that. So there's a bit of a difference there. We do try to deal with that by supplementing with things like data analytics and so on, so that we understand what that operational state looks like before we start putting things into it, and we also understand what we're actually launching into that state as well. But we had some success as well. We got our operationalised testing model. It took a little bit of time, but we have stood up something that we think is very capable of testing pretty much the top priority products, at the very least, for Telstra as they go through the process. We do a lot of testing and we generate a lot of metrics. And that's really, it is helping to drive better decision making on product launch. And we have had some successes. There are some products that have not launched and will never launch. And part of the reason for that is this testing program. But that doesn't always happen. At the very least, what we are doing is highlighting what the risk of some of these products are. And if we can at least mitigate some of those risks in market or off-platform in another channel, prepare the support group, for instance, then we've made some gains there. We have our dashboards so we can talk to executive. That's really, really key. But really, fundamentally, what it comes down to is we're about creating better experiences. And I think we're really starting to be able to do that in a very, very rapid fashion through the testing process. And that's us. I think we do have time for questions.
Thank you very much. We do have time for questions. Would anyone like to ask a question of Megan and Nilma? Down the back. Hang on.
Hi there. I'm really interested in if you've tracked how well your prediction of NPS in the real world meets what actually happens in the real world, and if you've kind of monitored or adapted to have better predictions.
We don't like to talk about predictions, and anybody we're involved in statistics in our group doesn't like to say that we're predicting NPS precisely. We do a risk profile. So if I can glibly get out of the question by saying that. But we haven't done the stats on that, no, and I think it is a very big challenge. Do we see where we have raised some concern about how the products are likely to go in market and see that eventuate in market? Absolutely. Do we see products that go through, Platinum is a fantastic example. We saw that was actually a fantastic service, and they had a couple of critical issues that we resolved, but we're like, well, this is great. I didn't expect it to be, to be honest. I thought it was a bit of an on-product construct. But we tested it and it went supremely well, and then when it hit the market, it's probably one of the best performing products from an NPS perspective that we've seen. So there certainly is that, relationship. But we do have the problem with that operational environment. You put services into an operational environment and kind of anything could happen. So we're creating risk, but whether or not there's a direct correlation, not so sure.
Thank you both very much.